So I think Afghanistan is going to be much more like a North Korea, where for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or until they attack us again, we're basically just going to turn a blind eye to the civil rights violation that's going on there, because that's what's going to happen. And I will say, I want to play another clip here. Megyn Kelly, who's obviously a right-wing pundit. She was on Fox News for a long time. When she went to CNN and got a giant contract, CNN or MSNBC? Can't remember. When she changed to one of the more liberal networks, she lasted all of about 6 months, and they found an excuse to fire her. But she does a podcast that just started. I find her to be, no pun intended, pretty fair and balanced. She will insult Republicans. She will insult kind of right-leaning philosophy, but she is also a conservative, and she picks on liberals a lot. But there's a really good 2 or 3 minute clip here where her and Charles Cook, who writes for the National Review, and I think he's written for the Wall Street Journal and the Atlantic, really, really intelligent guy. They basically talk about the failings in Afghanistan, and not the 20-year policy, not the argument about whether we should have stayed or should we go, but how we left. So I just want to play this little 3 minute clip, and then it ends, or in the middle of it, there is about a minute of snippets of Biden basically contradicting 2 weeks ago what he just said in this ABC interview that I just played. So now that the chips have fallen, the cards have been dealt. The cards have been dealt. The chips are on the table. Yeah, whatever the case may be. I fucked up my euphemism. Now that's happening, it's like, well, it was a foregone conclusion. We always knew that the Taliban was going to take over, and, if the government was going to fall, they were just going to fall. Well, 2 weeks ago, he was basically saying that was an impossibility. So I just wanted you to listen to this little 2 or 3 minute clip, because I listened to this podcast yesterday, and I thought it was great.
Well, let's start with how bad a disaster this is, how big a disaster this is. Top of the Sunday New York Times, free fall in Afghanistan. General Jack Keane, who orchestrated the surge, he was the architect of the surge in Iraq back in the day, calls this astounding and humiliating. Ryan Crocker, former U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan under Obama, calls it an indelible stain on Biden's presidency. Kevin McCarthy, an embarrassment for our nation. Axios, even the press getting in on it, saying a stunning failure for the West, an embarrassment for Biden. I could go on. And you say?
Well, I think all of those descriptions are appropriate. It's a disaster, and it is not acceptable or meaningful to respond to that sort of criticism by saying, well, what do you want to do then? Just stay forever, given that what we're talking about here is not the decision to stay or go, but the manner in which it was done, which was botched in a way no foreign policy execution has been botched in decades.
The comparisons to Vietnam abound today, his Saigon moment. But before we get to that, the Biden promises. I mean, if you look back on Biden's history, and I remember when he was saying we should divide Iraq into 3 or 4 different states. Remember this? I mean, he's just been so out there on foreign policy for so long and so wrong. But unfortunately now he's actually president. So he gets to put these ideas into action. And you called him out for this in a column yesterday. It's been making the rounds, but we put together a budded soundbite of his predictions about what would happen in Afghanistan, and more importantly, what wouldn't happen. And let's talk about how wrong they were. Listen.
Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
So what is the level of confidence that they have that it will not collapse?
The Afghan government and leadership has to come together. They clearly have the capacity to sustain the government in place.
Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. Because you have the Afghan troops have 300,000 well-equipped, as well-equipped as any army in the world, and an air force, against something like 75,000 Taliban. It is not inevitable.
Mr. President, some Vietnamese veterans see echoes of their experience in this withdrawal in Afghanistan. Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam, with some people feeling?
None whatsoever. Zero. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. They're not remotely comparable in terms of capability. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of an embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comparable.
You've spoken to the fact that the Taliban are sort of at their militarily strongest point that you've seen in 20 years. How do you feel personally about that, with the benefit of hindsight and all of the dollars and investments and American troops that were sent there?
Relative to the training and capacity of the ANSF and the federal police, they're not even close.
Wow.
Yep.
So I just wanted to play that to contrast the first clip that I showed you, where he's like, well, it was inevitable. The military fell and the president left and whatever. And, I think it's insulting for a couple reasons. I think it's insulting because You know, the Afghans who laid down their arms and didn't have some massive bloody fight against the Taliban, what do you want them to do, right? So the United States has been there for 20 years, telling them, training them, fighting alongside of them, saying, hey, man, we're in this with you. We're here to the end. We're going to make sure the Taliban doesn't take over. And then one day, Trump just announces, yeah, we're going to be out by May 1st. And then and then Biden says, well, yeah, let's extend that to September 11th, right? What kind of PR bullshit is that where you're like, well, I'm just going to arbitrarily extend this and all of our troops will be out by 9/11. And I want to get my photo op as the president saying, see, I'm the one who ended the 20-year war. And then everything just falls apart quickly because the Taliban knows, oh, you have a hard exit date. You're starting to draw down troops. Let's just go, right? It's like, it's game time. It's their Super Bowl. They're going to try to run amok and just start taking back more and more positions as the troops are drawing down. Whereas, as I mentioned, and this is really a testament to the United States military, that just keeping 2,500 people, 5,000 people in country the last few months has been enough to basically keep the country stable. Afghanistan's fucking huge, right? You just heard him talk about how there was 75,000, presumably, well-armed Taliban troops, and they were effectively minding their P's and Q's until we drew down and we kind of let it be known that we're completely getting out of Dodge.